Bonjour, bienvenue à toutes et à tous pour notre rendez-vous quotidien pour la presse en ligne et en direct sur EBS. Nous sommes le mardi 17 novembre. Je vais commencer comme chaque mardi avec l'agenda de la réunion du collège de demain. Les membres du collège adopteront le paquet d'automne du semestre européen qui comprend des avis sur les projets de plan budgétaire de la zone euro pour 2021, le rapport sur le mécanisme d'alerte et la recommandation sur la politique économique de la zone euro. Il s'agit de la deuxième étape du cycle du semestre européen 2021, après la présentation de la stratégie annuelle de croissance durable en septembre. Le vice-président exécutif Valdis Dombrovskis et les commissaires Paolo Gentiloni et Nicolas Schmit vous présenteront le paquet lors du compte-rendu de la réunion du collège demain. Nous aurons également un briefing technique sur le sujet cet après-midi à 15 h. Il sera sous embargo jusqu'au début du compte-rendu demain. Puis, le collège discutera de la stratégie de l'Union européenne sur les énergies renouvelables offshore, qui sera formellement adoptée jeudi. Le vice-président exécutif Frans Timmermans et le commissaire Kadri Simpson seront en salle de presse pour vous présenter la stratégie à midi ce jour-là, donc en lieu et place du midday briefing. Et vous aurez également l'occasion de poser vos questions lors d'un briefing technique juste après la conférence de presse. Enfin, le collège adoptera demain une recommandation sur l'utilisation de tests antigéniques rapides pour le diagnostic de Covid-19. Et je passe maintenant la parole à Balázs pour une annonce sur SURE.
Good afternoon. So, today the European Commission has disbursed 14 billion euro in loans to 9 EU countries under the SURE instrument, which is, as you know, the EU instrument that protects jobs and workers in the pandemic. Croatia has received 510 million euro, Cyprus 250 million euro, Greece 2 billion, Italy an additional 6.5 billion, Latvia 120 million, Lithuania 300 million, Malta 120 million, Slovenia 200 million, and Spain an additional 4 billion euro. Now, this support in the form of loans granted on favorable terms will help these member states in addressing increases in public expenditure to preserve employment. The Commission has so far proposed to make 90.3 billion euro in financial support available to 18 member states.
Thank you very much, Balázs. Now I pass the floor to Tim for an announcement on our energy efficiency policy.
Thanks, Eric. Good morning, everybody. The Commission has today launched 2 further public consultations as part of its work to deliver on our ambitious new emissions reduction targets for 2030, which were proposed in September. These consultations on the review of the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive will ensure that EU policies in these areas can contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. The path to climate neutrality requires us to scale up the production of renewable energy and reinforce our action on energy efficiency in the next decade. This consultation will help to shape the legislative proposals which the Commission is due to make in the summer of next year. The Commission is looking forward to receiving feedback from all stakeholders, all interested parties on these 2 consultations, in addition to the 4 climate-related consultations which we announced yesterday.
Thank you, Tim. Pour terminer, j'attire votre attention sur la vidéoconférence Affaires générales du Conseil qui se déroule en ce moment même. Les ministres des Affaires européennes discutent notamment sur le rapport annuel sur l'état de droit et préparent la réunion du Conseil européen de jeudi. Le vice-président Maroš Šefčovič et le commissaire Didier Reynders participeront à la conférence de presse qui clôturera la réunion vers 16h45. Enfin, restez connectés, car après la fin de notre rendez-vous, nous aurons un briefing technique sur la réforme de la politique agricole commune. Et avec ceci, nous pouvons passer à vos questions. And I pass the floor to Lotte.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Lotte.
Yeah. I have two questions regarding the mink situation still in Denmark. Just to know if you can give us a little more information about the conversation yesterday between Ursula von der Leyen and our Prime Minister, what they talked about, and also sort of the willingness in general from the Commission's side to look at the Danish wish to compensate the mink farmers that now have really to close for the rest of the year and also for the whole next year, and maybe they will never be back in business again. What's in general your view on the Danish wish to compensate as much as possible, and how do you see the red lines regarding state aid? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lotte. Indeed, there was yesterday early afternoon a phone call between the Danish Prime Minister, Mrs. Frederiksen, and the President of the Commission. And as the very short readout which we gave by tweet said, the conversation focused on the issue of coronavirus in Denmark, and in particular the situation which you are referring to with regards to minks and the policy vis-à-vis the culling of minks. As we said, clearly this is an ongoing issue, and there's not much that I can add on the content of the conversation, except to say, indeed, that the issue of the compensation was raised. Now, I pass the floor to Ariana on your more specific questions related to that.
Good morning, Lotte. What I can add to what Eric has already said is that indeed the Commission is in close and constructive contact with the Danish authorities on this matter to explore all possible solutions in line with Danish and European Union laws.
Thank you. Are there other questions for us? Lotte, you have a follow-up, but I'm afraid really that we're not going to be able to go further than what we have already said. But go ahead.
Okay, I'll just give it a try. Can you just put some, maybe a little more words on the red lines? What is it that the Danish government has to look for when they are putting together a package for compensation?
Thanks, Lotte, but as Eric has said at this stage, there's not much more we can add. It would be really premature to say anything else other than that we are in very close and constructive contact with the Danish authorities.
Thank you. Are there other issues on minks in Denmark and state aid? Please only keep your hand raised if this is the case. David, ah non, tu as baissé la main, pardon. Stéphane, is it on this? Stéphane Israël? Je serais surpris, mais on ne sait jamais. Les visons danois. Il faut que tu choisisses la bonne source pour ton micro, Stéphane. Ça ne semble pas marcher. David, tu as une question sur les visons? Non? D'accord. Santé, d'accord. Alors, on reviendra vers toi. Stéphane non plus. Je ne vois pas d'autres questions sur les mécanismes de compensation sur ce thème des visons. Donc, nous passons à d'autres sujets et je passe la parole alors à David avec une question pour la santé.
Oui, merci Eric. En fait, deux questions. Une, c'est sur la réunion du collège demain. Tu as annoncé une recommandation sur les tests rapides antigènes. Je voulais savoir s'il y aura aussi une recommandation sur les quarantaines, comme avait été annoncé ou évoqué les semaines passées. Et deuxième question sur les vaccins et les négociations en cours avec Moderna, parce que ce matin sur BFM TV, il y a eu une déclaration en disant que la société a signé beaucoup de contrats avec beaucoup de pays, mais pas avec l'Europe, l'Union européenne, même si les négociations sont en cours. Et je me demandais quel est le problème pour ce vaccin, pour les conclusions de ce contrat. Merci.
Merci David. En ce qui concerne ta première question, j'ai effectivement bien précisé quel était le point et la recommandation en particulier qui est à l'ordre du jour du collège demain. Et effectivement, c'est la recommandation sur les tests rapides et non pas celle que tu as évoquée. Comme tu le sais, la liste des points prévus, et je le dis très régulièrement, n'est qu'un aperçu des points possibles à l'ordre du jour du collège. Ça n'est que lors de la réunion hebdomadaire que la décision définitive est prise ou non. Et bien entendu, cela dépend entièrement, simplement, de l'état du dossier, des préparatifs en cours. Il y a toute une série de facteurs qui peuvent influencer la décision de mettre un point à l'ordre du jour ou non. Ça n'implique absolument pas qu'il y ait un problème de fond particulier ou autre, mais peut-être simplement qu'il y a encore un certain nombre de préparatifs à finaliser. En ce qui concerne ta deuxième question, je passe la parole à Stéphane.
Oui, bonjour David. En ce qui concerne les négociations avec Moderna, comme tu sais, nous ne faisons pas de commentaires sur l'état des négociations. Nous communiquons là-dessus le moment où nous avons conclu un contrat ou le moment où nous avons fini les discussions exploratoires. Dans le cas de Moderna, nous avions finalisé les discussions exploratoires le 24 août. Nous sommes en négociation avec eux. Ce sont des négociations qui sont toujours importantes et complexes pour tous les développeurs de vaccins. Il s'agit de négociations très importantes. Nous voudrons, comme ça a été déjà souligné à plusieurs reprises, établir un portefeuille diversifié de différents candidats de vaccins pour avoir plus de chances de trouver des vaccins qui sont en effet efficaces et sûrs. Mais en ce moment, je ne peux pas dire plus sur l'état des négociations avec Moderna. Je t'invite à suivre nos sources d'informations. Peut-être, si vous permettez, encore une chose que je voulais ajouter au point que Eric a soulevé concernant cette recommandation des quarantaines. J'attire ton attention sur le fait que les CDC avaient déjà donné une guidance, recommandation dans le domaine des quarantaines. Et donc, nous continuons évidemment à discuter ce sujet très important avec les États membres. Merci.
Merci Stéphane. David, tu as une question de suivi.
Oui.
Nous t'avons perdu. Stéphane, tu as repris la parole par erreur, visiblement. David, réessaye.
Alors, voilà. Juste très bref, une clarification. Est-ce que la Commission a encore l'intention de présenter une proposition de recommandation sur les quarantaines et l'isolement ou pas, ou ça suffit ACDC et ses recommandations? Merci.
Stéphane.
Oui, merci David. Donc en effet, on a ces recommandations de ECDC. Nous continuons les discussions avec les États membres. Pour ton info, ce sujet qui est en effet très important fera l'objet de discussions aussi avec la plateforme des scientifiques qui a été établie la semaine dernière. Et donc, s'il s'avère que sur base des discussions avec les États membres, sur base des discussions avec les scientifiques, il y a un besoin pour d'autres recommandations, nous ferons tout ce qui est nécessaire pour aller dans cette direction, évidemment. Merci.
Merci. Nous restons sur le thème de la santé. Y a-t-il d'autres questions pour nous sur la santé? Je vois 3 mains levées. Je passe la parole à Marco.
Oui, merci, Eric. I have a question on vaccines as well, and on the contract signed by the Commission with some producer. What happens if one of those vaccines does not succeed or does not get the authorization for EMA? I mean, would the EU pay anyway the money that is object of the deal or a share of it. Could you tell us how will it work in this case? Thank you.
I pass the floor to Stefan again.
Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you for this very good question indeed. You know that we want to develop, as I've said already a few times, a diversified and broad portfolio of different vaccine candidates. We do not know at this stage which vaccine candidate will be successful or not, which one will be effective and safe. Of course, there's already quite some positive reporting on some vaccines, which we welcome very much. But in order to broaden this portfolio, we felt it necessary to conclude these advanced purchase agreements with different vaccine developers. We expect from these vaccine developers that they are ready to make available very big numbers of vaccines quickly as soon as the vaccine turns out to be successful, safe, and sure. But to help companies to have this capacity, we, of course, as a Commission, are ready to invest in the development of this production capacity. Again, companies have to be able to immediately proceed with the production of hundreds of millions of vaccines when the vaccine turns out to be successful. So we know, and we knew that from the beginning, that there is always a risk that investments that are made may not lead to indeed successful vaccines. Again, we try to reduce this risk by having investments in several companies, but we are aware that yes, there is a risk that some of the investment will not come to successful vaccines. This being said, I would like to stress, however, that these investments in production capacity are always important, also in the context of building production capacity, strengthening production capacities in the European Union when it comes to development of medicines and vaccines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Catherine, you have a health-related question. Please go ahead.
Oops. Yes, Eric. I hope my question had to run down and answer the door because the postman didn't know the midday was on. But anyways, I hope this question hasn't been asked. But yesterday when the President did her presentation about her statement on vaccines, she mentioned that there had been tangible progress with CureVac. I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about what tangible progress means. Is it, which phase of trials is it in? And she also said that there would be up to 405 million doses ordered. And given that Moderna, which seems very promising, given that the exploratory talks only led to an order of, well, a potential order of 160 million, does that show your confidence in this particular vaccine? Or is it linked to the fact that the EU was an early investor in this company via the European Investment Bank?
Thank you. Again, question for Stefan.
Thank you. There's lots of questions in this question. As far as CureVac is concerned, yes, we have. The President has announced that the College will give its green light to a signature of a contract for 405 million doses, which is 225 doses plus an option of 180 million. As far as Moderna is concerned, during in the context of the finalization of the exploratory talks, we agreed on 160 million doses, 80 million plus 80 million. As far as Moderna is concerned, of course, we continue to have the negotiations, and we will see how and in which type of, how this will be translated into an actual contract. We cannot, however, comment on the actual specific state of where we are with the clinical trials. We take note, obviously, of the statements that have been done by the different companies. What is important is that the actual evaluation as to the efficiency and the safety of these vaccines will be done by the European Medicines Agency. As you know, they have an extremely important role to play, and it's up to them to assess to what extent the vaccines that have been developed respect these fundamental criteria of safety and effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. You have a follow-up, Catherine.
Can I just ask, the 405 million versus 160 overall, immediate and, in the pipeline orders of doses, does that reflect your confidence in that vaccine?
Stefan.
Yes, hello. We conclude contracts with vaccine developers whenever we have confidence, indeed, that there is a good chance of having an effective and safe vaccine. Otherwise, we would not conclude the contracts. The numbers, of course, of the doses, these are things that depend on many factors and criteria which have been laid down in our vaccine strategy, which have to do with the production capacity, which have to do with delivery times, which have to do with costs, which have to do with technology, and so on. But the fact that we sign an advanced purchase agreement with a company means that we, of course, hope that this vaccine that the vaccine developer is working on will turn out to be successful and safe. Thank you.
Thanks. Catherine, one last follow-up, but then I will move on to your many colleagues who are waiting.
Yeah, sorry about that, Eric. Sorry about that. But one aspect that Stefan didn't address is the fact that the EU has funded this company, CureVac, via the European Investment Bank, and does that have any bearing on your decision? And do we get mates rates for doses if we are an investor in that company?
Stefan, mates rates.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question about rates.
Yeah, a friendly rate. But Catherine, perhaps I can answer that question if you switch on. Yeah, the fact is that the Commission is, Stefan, voilà. The Commission is negotiating with companies which, since the beginning, it believes have the potential to deliver a vaccine that works, that is effective, okay? But however, because when we started this, you need to remember that we started this quite some months ago, before the summer. We could not be sure of which technology, which company would come up with the quickest, best, effective vaccine. So that's why we went for what we call a portfolio approach. So clearly, we did our homework. We analyzed what we thought were promising possibilities, and then we started these negotiations on advanced purchasing agreements. One company has indeed, or some companies have received funding of some sort, or loans, in particular from the IB. CureVac is one, but it's not the only one, if I remember well. AstraZeneca as well. Obviously, what we are doing is negotiating bulk contracts using the fact that we are 450 million Europeans in order to get good rates. That's the whole objective. Now, what you need to remember is that it's not the Commission that is buying the vaccines. It will be the member states. What we are doing is indeed, as you quite rightly say, negotiating the best possible conditions for delivery of those vaccines to member states should they decide to buy them. Okay? And as Stefan has said, what we are doing is we are investing in those companies' research, development, and production capacities in Europe in order to ensure that they can develop this vaccine and, if approved by the European Medicines Agency, that these vaccines can then be distributed to Europeans as quickly as possible. But ultimately, it is the member states who buy the vaccines. Okay, let's continue on this theme. Griselda.
Merci. Excusez-moi, il y a un énorme bruit. Excusez-moi pour la caméra, j'arrive pas à la brancher. Maintenant, ça va?
Pas de problème.
Excusez-moi pour la caméra,
vas-y.
J'arrive pas à la brancher. J'aimerais savoir, est-ce que le fait que Moderna ait annoncé qu'ils sont prêts à avoir le vaccin peut faire augmenter le prix, ou est-ce qu'une fois vous avez un préaccord sur une quantité concrète de doses, le prix est fixé. Et puis, j'ai écouté, on s'était parlé ce matin, mais je ne parviens pas tout à fait à comprendre pourquoi il y a une différence entre 300 doses pour Pfizer, 300 millions, désolé, et 80 pour Moderna. C'est assez grande différence.
Stéphane.
Griselda, merci beaucoup pour cette question. Comme j'ai voulu expliquer un peu avant, lorsque nous avons ce genre de négociation, nous prenons en considération évidemment tous les critères que j'ai énoncés déjà avant, la capacité de production de la société, la technologie de la société, les coûts qui sont nécessaires pour investir, la technologie qui est utilisée, les méthodes scientifiques qui sont utilisées. Et tout cela fait partie d'un package de négociation qui mène à un certain nombre de doses et à un certain prix. En ce qui concerne le prix, je ne vais évidemment pas pouvoir dire pourquoi, quel prix avec quelle société. Ce qui est important, c'est que pour la Commission, le vaccin ne doit pas seulement être effectif et sûr, mais aussi abordable. C'est un principe important pour notre stratégie de vaccin. Donc, il faut voir le résultat de ces négociations qui mènent à un contrat dans le cadre de cette approche globale dans laquelle nous prenons en considération toute une série de critères. Merci.
Merci. Grisella, tu as une question de suivi. Je ne vais plus autoriser qu'une question de suivi parce qu'il y a tellement de collègues qui veulent poser des questions.
Non, mais je suis très rapide, Eric. Juste, je n'ai pas demandé le prix, je demandais si les prix augmentent après l'annonce réalisée de que les vaccins arrivent dans un laboratoire concret, dans ces cas pour Moderna. C'est ça ma question. Merci.
Griselda, nous ne donnons pas de commentaires sur les prix à part ce que je viens de dire.
Voilà. Tu peux être assuré que la Commission, évidemment, négocie au mieux de ses possibilités. Tu sais que nous avons beaucoup d'expérience en matière de négociation, notamment de négociation commerciale. Nous avons des équipes pour ce faire. Et donc, évidemment, nous travaillons, comme l'a dit Stéphane, pour nous assurer d'obtenir des contrats qui répondent aux intérêts des Européens. Et il y a plein de dimensions dont il faut tenir compte. Alors, restons sur ce thème. Angela, you have a question on vaccines.
Yes, hello. Sorry, my camera doesn't work. Sorry for this. Yeah, I have a question on the deals on vaccines. I read quite a lot of criticism on the fact that the Commission is signing deals on the basis of the press releases or the announcements by the companies, Pfizer or Moderna, if this is going to be the case. I was wondering, is this true that the deals are being signed only on the basis of press releases without any scientific publication on the vaccines which have been announced? And how do you reply to this criticism? And another quick question on the deals as well. How do you reply to the associations, NGOs, or the people who are asking that the contracts, deals should be public in order to be able to control prices and the distribution of the vaccines? Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you, Angela. Pass the floor to Stéphane again.
Yes, thank you very much. On your first question, are we simply concluding contracts because all of a sudden there are some nice press reports about the state of play of this vaccine? I think Eric has already replied to this a few days ago, saying that is clearly not the case. We are taking these negotiations extremely seriously. It goes through two phases. A first negotiation, which leads to the conclusion of exploratory talks, where we have kind of a pre-agreement on the number of doses. And then we have the second part where we try to translate this into an advanced purchase agreement. This is a complex negotiations. We're talking about very important topics. It's very technical, so this takes time, and we take this very seriously with the help of a negotiation team. The negotiation is being done by negotiation teams, supported by scientific evidence. So this is done extremely seriously. Any statement which would say that we're just following the waves of media on this are not correct. Second, what do we say about the request to publish these contracts? Well, I think this is also something that has been raised already a few times in this press room. It is extremely important to know that we are having negotiations in a very sensitive environment. There's quite some information which is sensitive business information which cannot be shared. I'm talking here, for instance, about the price or development processes or production processes, which are part of the confidential business information and therefore covered by confidentiality clauses. And we have to respect these clauses. I would like to stress immediately that this is not only in the interest of these companies, but it's also in our interest. We want to preserve the integrity of the negotiations that are still ongoing with other companies. If we were to publish this very sensitive information whilst negotiations are still ongoing with other companies, you make these negotiations extremely difficult, and I would doubt that it would be in the interest of the European citizens, for which we try to reach correct agreements. As far as transparency is concerned, finally, I believe that several measures are taken to be as transparent as possible on any topic which has to do with the development of these contracts. Our chief negotiator has gone to the European Parliament. We are organizing webinars. So there's a lot is being done to show where we are and to keep everybody informed on the state of play of things. Thank you.
Thank you. The fact is, Angela, that we started discussions with the vaccine developers extremely early, right? Way before the summer, if you remember well. And therefore, there is a parallelism between the work that they have been doing in terms in terms of developing the vaccine, and the discussions that we have had with them all over the summer. But we are not linking the signature or approval of any contract with any specific announcement. The fact is that in many of the cases, the preliminary discussions were concluded some time ago already, so well before the announcements. But then drawing up the contracts and getting them approved by the college takes some time, as I had the opportunity of saying already last week, I believe. Lorenzo, on this issue.
Vous m'entendez?
Oui.
Je sais que j'ai un microphone qui n'est pas trop fort. Alors, j'ai quelques questions concernant les contrats et une question qui n'a pas été évoquée encore concernant les aéroports, en fait, puisque la Commission va s'occuper des tests rapides. Je me rappelle qu'il y avait, Stéphane avait dit il y a quelques jours, quelques semaines, qu'il y avait des discussions en cours entre l'EASA, l'Agence pour la sécurité aérienne européenne, et les CDC sur le développement des tests rapides et dans les aéroports, le type de conditions, disons, auxquelles les aéroports peuvent offrir aux passagers des vols aériens. Est-ce que ces discussions ont abouti à quelque chose? Parce qu'on a toujours des conditions très différentes dans les différents aéroports et ça rend beaucoup plus difficile les voyages intra-européens. Alors, les questions concernant les contrats, moi je voulais savoir, premièrement, si dans les négociations sur les vaccins, on s'occupe aussi de la question de la conservation des vaccins, parce que c'est très important si un vaccin doit être conservé à moins de 200 degrés de Celsius ou s'il peut être conservé à la température de l'environnement normal. Et l'autre question, est-ce que dans ces contrats, il y a quelque chose qui concerne la responsabilité civile, la liability en fait, des sociétés pharmaceutiques dans le cas où il y aurait des dommages collatéraux, c'est-à-dire que des problèmes de santé pour le vaccin, des conséquences négatives sur la santé qui ne sont pas apparues, qui n'ont pas été visibles pendant le testing. Parce que ça, on sait que dans des conditions d'extrême rapidité pour le développement des vaccins, on peut avoir plus de risques, en fait. Et la dernière chose concerne les brevets. En fait, ces vaccins sont développés avec beaucoup d'argent qui est donné par l'Europe, mais le brevet reste dans les mains des sociétés qui développent les vaccins. Est-ce qu'à un certain moment, ces sociétés pourront se libérer, disons, des conditions de ces contrats et décider les prix qu'ils veulent? En fait, c'est la question qui avait posée Griselda et à laquelle Stéphane n'a pas répondu, mais je crois que c'est très important de savoir si à un certain moment, ces sociétés pourront décider elles-mêmes les prix, et même des prix très élevés qui ne sont plus affordable, comme on dit, pour les consommateurs précis.
Merci, ça fait beaucoup de questions. Je passe la parole à Stéphane, de nouveau.
Oui, merci Lorenzo. En ce qui concerne les protocoles ou les guidances pour tout ce qui est aéroport, j'ai en effet évoqué il y a quelques jours le fait que le EASA, European Aviation Safety Agency, et le ECDC, European Disease Prevention and Control Agencies, sont en train de travailler là-dessus. Et ils travaillent là-dessus. Je te demande d'avoir encore un petit peu de patience, mais le fruit de ce travail sera présenté bientôt. Justement, comme tu l'as dit, pour créer un peu de clarification en ce qui concerne les situations des aéroports. En ce qui concerne la conservation des vaccins, et maintenant on est de nouveau dans le domaine des vaccins. C'est vrai que les contrats prévoient clairement les éléments techniques du vaccin pour que les États membres puissent prendre les bonnes mesures de conservation. C'est d'ailleurs une des raisons pour laquelle, dans notre communication du 15 octobre, dans laquelle nous avons donné des recommandations aux États membres pour préparer leur plan de vaccination, de bien réfléchir sur cette question aussi, de bien réfléchir sur la question d'infrastructure, de se préparer pour pouvoir conserver les vaccins aux conditions nécessaires. Donc, c'est très important, en effet, comme tu l'as souligné, d'être bien préparé. En ce qui concerne la responsabilité, sur ce point-là, ce que je tiens à souligner, c'est que les contrats qu'on conclut avec les sociétés ne changent nullement les règles de la responsabilité des producteurs. Ces règles sont établies dans la directive sur la responsabilité des produits et ces règles restent complètement d'application pour les producteurs. Dans certaines situations, il y a des possibilités pour les États membres de prévoir des indemnifications des producteurs, mais ça, c'est dans des cas extrêmement spécifiques et concrets. La quatrième question, c'était sur le prix. En effet, qu'est-ce qui se passe avec le prix, etc. Ce que je peux dire, c'est que dans nos contrats, nos Advanced Purchase Agreements, nos contrats avec les sociétés, nous nous mettons d'accord sur la livraison, ou plutôt la provision d'un certain nombre de doses à un certain prix. Nous voulons suffisamment de doses pour que les citoyens européens ont suffisamment de vaccins et on veut s'assurer que ces doses seront achetées à des prix corrects. Et ça, c'est justement l'objectif de ces contrats et c'est ce qu'on essaie d'atteindre avec ces contrats. Merci.
Merci beaucoup Stéphane. Je vois encore d'autres questions sur la santé et les vaccins. Ne gardez votre main levée, s'il vous plaît, que si c'est sur ce sujet. Je vois une question de Noureddine.
Pardon, Eric, c'est pour Peter, en fait.
Alors, s'il te plaît, baisse la main, nous reviendrons vers toi. David, rather. Hassenhorn, you have the floor.
Thanks, Eric. If I could just follow up with Stefan on the issue of transparency and the handling here. I wonder if the Commission at any point consulted any experts on procurement, given the complete unique nature these purchases. There's just never been a situation like this that we can think of where the demand would be so universal and across the entire world. And so perhaps, has there been any consideration to the fact that perhaps the usual practices followed in procurement, some of these confidentiality mechanisms, do not in fact serve European taxpayers in this circumstance, because that perhaps the only way to keep prices down for the public would be complete and full transparency about the investments that are being made by the public and the cost of development of the vaccines, and some transparent understanding, discussion, even debate about how much profit might be reasonable in that setting. Was there any expert consultation to consider whether in fact the old rules should not apply in this circumstance? Thanks.
Thank you, Stefan.
This is a very important procurement process, you're right. Now, we have the advantage of being held by a lot of specialists in the area of procurement. We have very strict rules in the area of procurement, and it's for us absolutely fundamental and crucial that we make sure that these rules are respected. We are aware that at any time, what we do can be audited, because we are accountable towards the European citizens and towards the budgetary authority. So at any time, we can be audited. So we have made sure that with the help of all the specialists that we have in the house, the rules that we follow are the rules that should be followed and are correct, and that we are in line with them. As far as publicity is concerned, I reiterate the fact that there are confidentiality clauses that have to be respected with regard to information that comes from companies, but also, and again, it is in our interest that we can follow a procedure, the tendering rules, the contracting rules, making use of these confidentiality clauses. Otherwise, it risks making the negotiations harder than they already are. Thank you.
So, David, this is not opposing old rules and new rules. First of all, the Commission is not a body that can simply decide not to respect regulatory frameworks in place. We have to follow the rules as they are. And let me remind you that it takes two to tango. When you are negotiating with a partner, it's not as you can simply impose on the partner your conditions for the negotiation, right? Or else there is no negotiation that is possible. Remember, these are, of course, companies that all are developing products on a market. We are negotiating with quite a few companies at the same time, and therefore you have to ensure that you can carry out the negotiations with the individual companies in such a way as to get to a result. And therefore we followed the process that you know well, and on which we have also organized here a technical briefing, in the firm belief that it is the best and quickest way of delivering a result. I see one more hand raised on the issue of health. I pass the floor to Louise.
Yes, hello, Eric and Stefan. Just a quick question on any future contracts. As far as I know, apart from Moderna and CureVac, there have also been preliminary talks with Novavax. And could there be any other deals with any other companies in the pipeline? Thanks.
Thank you. Again, a question for Stefan.
Yes, thank you. We want to develop as I said before, a diversified portfolio using different technologies, different approaches, so that we increase the chances of ending up with an effective and safe virus. So we will do that. We are negotiating with companies. As far as names are concerned, who we are having still negotiations with, this is information that we do not share. As soon as we have reached a situation where we have concluded successful exploratory talks, we will obviously share this. But for the time being, I cannot say more on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Okay, I think this closes the health chapter. So I now open the floor to other questions. We have a question from Noureddin.
Bonjour Eric, j'ai une question pour Peter si tu veux bien. Vous m'entendez? Oui, hein?
Vas-y, vas-y.
Vas-y, vas-y. Ouais. Je l'ai préparé en anglais. What could be the European Union reaction if Trump administration or Israel launched strikes against the nuclear sites in Iran? More precisely, Mr. Le Drian and Heiko Maas wrote a paper or opinion today in Le Monde calling the the new administration or President-elect Biden, when he will be in office, to have a common approach with the European Union to deal with the problem related to the nuclear deal in Iran, but also to have a common European-American approach towards the crisis in the East Mediterranean. Can Peter tell us what could be the contribution of both sides to solve the problems posed with the nuclear, related to the nuclear deal with Iran, and also to the problem posed today in East Mediterranean? Thank you.
Thank you, Nourdine. I'm going to give Peter the floor, but you know very well that we do not answer hypothetical questions like the one you have asked at the beginning of your intervention on what would be a reaction if there was a strike against any country. So Peter will definitely not answer that question, but I give him the floor on the second one.
Good afternoon, thank you. And indeed, of course, we never speculate on what-if scenarios, but on other aspects of your question, indeed, and it was very obvious from the first messages and reactions from the European countries after the US presidential elections that Europe is expecting and Europe is prepared to work more closely with the United States new presidential administration based on more cooperation, more dialogue. And if we want to build a stronger friendship and better partnership, then of course the Europe is prepared for it. There are many areas where we can work together and where we have actually interest to work together in the foreign policy issue. You mentioned some of them, that's Iran, but that's also Russia, that's the Eastern neighborhood, so Libya, the Middle East, Balkans as well, and of course Turkey and the Eastern Mediterranean. So in the past, since EU and US are based on shared values, and we have so many historical links and practical links among ourselves, and we have the same political systems, in the past, always when we worked together on some issue, we were always more effective and more successful. And this is something the EU is expecting also now from the new administration, incoming administration. In 2 days' time, the ministers of foreign affairs of the EU member states will meet for the video conference, so informal foreign affairs council, because it's not possible to meet in person. And this will be the first opportunity for them to discuss among themselves how they see Europe's contribution to develop this stronger partnership and better friendship with the United States under the new administration. So this is work in progress, but the EU was very clear already in signaling that we are interested in more cooperation, in more dialogue, because we are facing many challenges in the current world, and we will be more successful when we tackle them together. And Iran is one of them. So there is even cautious optimism when it comes to the indications from Mr. Biden that he intends to approach the Iran issue completely different to what Mr. Trump chose in terms of handling Iran. So we will be waiting once the new administration is in place, unveils its policies. But as I said, there is cautious optimism that when it comes to Iran, they will change the overall dynamic, and we will not have to speculate about hypothetical scenarios.
Thank you, Peter. So let us stay. Noureddine, follow up, but quick, please, because we're running out of time. We have a technical briefing coming up.
What could the United States and European Union do together to solve the crisis in the region?
I think this is abroad because I'm not really sure what you think, what you have in mind regarding the crisis in the region, unless I missed the start of your question. But I would just reiterate: we are now discussing what will or what should be the EU's contribution in order to reach out to the new administration. The discussions are ongoing. They started only a few weeks ago, in the aftermath of the elections. And what is bottom line and the main objective of the EU is to build a stronger partnership, to renew the close cooperation and the dialogue dialogue with the United States and to deal with all the challenges of the world nowadays together. When we join forces, we are always more successful, and this is in our shared interest.
Thank you, Peter. So we remain on foreign affairs. Please only keep your hand raised if your question concerns foreign affairs. And I pass the floor to Alexandra.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking my question. So a question on G20. As you know, last month, European lawmakers urged Commission President von der Leyen, European Council President Michel not to attend the G20 summit, virtual summit in Saudi Arabia, to downgrade EU's presence there due to human rights violations. They also wrote a letter, didn't get a response yet, apparently. So my question is, am I right assuming that President von der Leyen is attending this summit, will attend this summit nonetheless? And what message do you want to send to all those people who have been victims of human rights violations in Saudi Arabia, in particular to women's rights activists who are currently in jail? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for your question. Yes, I can confirm that President von der Leyen will be taking part in what is a multilateral event called the G20, which is hosted by the current rotating chair, which is Saudi Arabia. This G20 will be attended by all the leaders of the G20, and I think it is extremely important to distinguish between a multilateral form of discussion that will be discussing some of the key challenges that the planet as a whole faces, and in particular, obviously, the current health crisis that we face, but also climate change, etc., from our bilateral concerns vis-à-vis human rights and our bilateral relation with Saudi Arabia. I will call Nabila to the podium to tell you a bit more about what we do on these serious concerns that you have raised. Sorry, it's Peter, not Nabila. Yes, apologies, Peter.
Indeed, thank you. And exactly, I mean, it's very important to delink the multilateral and bilateral aspect. And on the bilateral track, the EU is constantly following very closely what is going on in Saudi Arabia when it comes to the situation of respect of human rights and situation of people who are defending the human rights, including individual cases. And we are vocal both in the public statements when it's necessary, but also in the diplomatic outreach, which we are doing towards our Saudi partners. So this is quite high on our agenda because human rights are one of the principles on which the EU is based, and we are not deviating from this in the contact with the partners, even though they don't like it. And our contacts with Saudi Arabia have intensified anyway over the last few months, and we've been raising our concerns, and we discussed further how to improve the human rights situation, the protection of human rights in the kingdom, and we will continue to pay utmost attention to this question in the run-up to the G20 summit and afterwards, because as Eric has explained, this is a multilateral fora to deal with completely different issues under the presidency which is rotating. But our dialogue with Saudi Arabia continues beyond this summit, and we will continue to engage, to raise the issues regarding human rights with the Saudi partners, and also in coordination with the EU Special Representative for Human Rights and all the other relevant stakeholders. So for us, this is like ongoing discussion, and it's in discussion where we pay a lot of attention to engage with the partners.
Thank you. You have a follow-up, Alexandra.
Just a quick follow-up. Will human rights violation be raised at the G20 summit from the EU's perspective?
Alexandra, we do not fix the agenda of the G20. These are events which follow a very, very strict agenda and protocol order when it comes to speaking. And of course, these are the conditions under which the Commission will be participating in the G20. I think that Peter has very clearly explained that there are many channels of communication to raise our concerns related to human rights in our dialogue, our bilateral dialogue with Saudi Arabia. I pass the floor to James now on a different subject. James, on Belarus, not on Brexit.
Not on Brexit. Not on Brexit, Eric. Yeah, Belarus. There's reports from Belarus saying that the government has suspended dialogue on human rights with the EU, reduced participation in the Eastern Partnership, and has proposed the suspension of the Belarus EU coordination group. I'm wondering if you guys have any reaction to that, and if you could give us a rundown on basically what the state of play is and where we stand on everything with the sanctions and EU-Belarus relations. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, a question for Peter.
Thank you, and I'll be very brief because Belarus will be also one of the topics discussed in 2 days' time on Thursday during the informal Foreign Affairs Council or the video conference of the foreign ministers of the EU. So I would not preempt those discussions, but the position of the EU is very clear. We don't recognize the legitimacy of Lukashenko as a head of state, and the dialogue between the EU and Belarus at the official level was already suspended a long time ago in response to the unacceptable, shameful events from the side of the state authorities. So we reduced everything in our engagement with official Belarusian authorities to expert level anyway. And the overall review is ongoing, how to shape further our relations. So Belarusian authorities, instead of trying to make news of their suspension in Eastern Partnership or in the format they are engaging with the EU, should really address the big issues they have at home, and that's the repression of their own population, and trying to see how to launch the inclusive national dialogue about the solution and how to meet the legitimate expectations and demands of their people. The dialogue between the EU and Belarus was already changed and downgraded to a very bare expert level. So this is the state of play now. We are reviewing all the programs. We want to support Belarusian people, civil society, citizens, and as I said, the discussions will be taken further in 2 days' time by the foreign ministers, including the discussions about possible extension of the restrictive measures, meaning sanctions.
Thank you. Let's stay on issues related to foreign affairs. Markus, you have a question on foreign affairs. Markus Becker.
Oops, do you hear me?
Yes, we do. Go ahead, Markus.
Yeah, good, thanks. Well, my question would be about Poland, Hungary and the budget. I don't know if that qualifies as foreign affairs, actually.
I believe that it doesn't, so we will come back to you afterwards. Christian, une question sur les affaires extérieures. Christian, tu as la parole.
Oui, merci. Je voudrais continuer sur le Bélarus et avoir un peu plus de précision de la part de Peter. Il est évident que lors de la réunion des ministres des Affaires étrangères, on va discuter sanctions. Aujourd'hui, le président Loukachenko, son fils et plus de 50 dignitaires du régime sont sur la liste noire. On se rend compte que ce type de sanctions ont atteint leurs limites, que ce n'a pas changé d'un iota. Pire, la répression s'est accentuée, est devenue plus violente. Les témoignages qui nous viennent de là-bas sont assez abominables. Alors, je voudrais savoir qu'est-ce qu'on a de plus comme option sur la table pour les ministres, puisque finalement les ministres décident sur des options qui sont préparées par les services de M. Borrell, qui lui ne décide pas, mais prend les mesures quand on lui a donné le feu vert. Donc, qu'est-ce que vous mettez sur la table pour la réunion des ministres des Affaires étrangères pour le FAC de jeudi? Merci.
Peter.
Merci, Christian. Je voudrais dire que tout est possible s'il y a un accord de tous pays membres de l'Union européenne. Et je ne voulais pas préjuger le résultat et le contenu des discussions des ministres. Donc, on doit attendre les discussions, l'évaluation de la partie des pays membres de l'Union européenne sur la situation au Bélarus, les propositions aussi, parce que les discussions dans le cadre du Conseil des affaires étrangères sont aussi sur les possibles propositions. Ce n'est pas nécessaire qu'on a déjà une c'est des propositions pour l'adoption. On peut discuter aussi les mesures créatives, les mesures nouvelles, s'il y a un accord. Donc, on doit attendre la discussion des ministres et comme je dis, tout est possible s'il y a un accord entre les 27 pays membres de l'Union européenne.
Christian.
Oui, tout est possible. Est-ce qu'on a des sanctions économiques qui sont envisagées comme celles que l'on a imposées à la Russie? Je sais, c'est un peu énervant, mais c'est quand même, il faut faire un peu la clarification. Je veux dire, on a fait tout le panel de la liste noire. Il n'y a plus un nom à rajouter qui soit crédible. Donc, pour être crédible dans l'Union européenne, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire? Est-ce qu'on a des sanctions économiques? Et quelles sont les sanctions économiques? Quelle est la limite des sanctions économiques? Il y a un passage de gaz qui se fait par le Bélarus. Est-ce qu'on coupe le robinet et est-ce qu'on prive le gouvernement des recettes des droits de transit du gaz qui pourraient lui couper effectivement la possibilité de s'approvisionner en armes et en matériel de répression? C'est ça ma question. Merci.
Christian, on avait parfaitement compris ta question, mais je crois que tu as parfaitement compris notre volonté de garder nos préparatifs, les préparatifs qui sont en cours et la teneur de ces préparatifs pour les membres du Conseil Affaires extérieures. Je comprends que tu souhaiterais avoir des détails avant, mais je comprends bien aussi que Peter t'a donné les éléments d'information qu'il pouvait te donner aujourd'hui sur ce sujet. Okay, related question, not related, but also foreign affairs, if we can consider it like that, a question on Brexit from Verena, on EU-UK relations, I would say. Verena, are you still with us? You do not seem to be with us anymore. Oh, you're there? Okay, go ahead. Your mic source apparently is problematic. Yes.
Better now?
Yes. Es funktioniert.
Super. Wunderbar. There are reports as we speak that negotiators are aiming for a deal early next week, and I was wondering if you could comment on that. Thank you.
We do not comment on reports on any subject, as you know. So what is clear is that we continue to negotiate intensively with our UK partners, and we aim, obviously, to find a deal when the conditions will be there. But we're not going to comment or give a blow-by-blow account of what negotiators are working towards. Verena, I'm very sorry. Okay, I see one hand raised for the moment on another issue, I suspect. Athanasios. Marcus, I have not forgotten you. We will come back to you. Athanasios.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. It's another issue, of course. It's an administrative issue. Last week, I've asked you about the allegations on lack of fairness and equal practice in the ongoing EPSO competition, but I didn't get an answer. So let me repeat, there is a secretary's competition here in Brussels that's ongoing, but it has been simultaneously cancelled in many other countries, giving a clear advantage of more time to study for many of those candidates. So my question is, how is this compatible to equity in equal practice that has to be embedded in the practices of EPSO? Thank you.
Balash.
Good afternoon. So it's a pretty specific question, but in general, of course, just like the EU institutions follow the rules of the hosting states, EPSO has to do the same. As you know, EPSO has testing centers around the world in a very large number of countries, and the rules that have been introduced in the context of the coronavirus crisis also apply to EPSO. So what does this mean in practice? In practice, of course, the rules differ in the different countries where EPSO has testing centers, which is why in some countries it's possible to keep centers open, whereas in other countries it is not possible. Now, the principle of equality, of course, applies, and EPSO does everything it can to ensure that candidates can take their test in the center of their preference. And when this is not possible, individual solutions will be sought, but the utmost priority remains that we would like to make sure that every single candidate gets to take his or her test at the center of his or her preference.
Athanasios, you have a follow-up.
Yes, I have a follow-up because I'm asking the exact opposite of that. The point is not having some taking the exam now and some others later. The point is having everybody taking the exam at the same time, so everybody has the same study time. That's what they're telling me. Anyway, the other thing, the other aspect of the situation is the COVID crisis. You rightfully mentioned it. But since the European Commission itself has turned back to phase 0, where only critical staff is allowed in the office, don't you think that there is some kind of loss of credibility when one of your DGs, namely EPSO, is still continuing the exams, which to an external observer is nothing more than meetings of many people in small rooms for 3 hours? How you can do that? Thanks.
Well, I think the key point to make here is that when we make decisions in terms of our approach to our administration during COVID times, we are looking at the measures of the countries where our offices are located, most of which can be found, of course, in Belgium, but we have also a significant presence in Luxembourg and Italy. So when we take decisions on our return to office strategy, we look at the measures that are in place in these countries. Now, as I said, EPSO has a much broader presence around the world, not only in EU member states, but also beyond. And in fact, they are present in every single EU member state. So when they decide on whether to keep an office open or not, they look at the applicable measures in the countries in question.
Thank you, Balázs. I now go back to Markus Becker and your question on the MFF and the rule of law.
Yes, hi, thank you. I would have a couple of technical questions about this. Well, as you know, there was the veto against the MFF regulation and the own resources decision by Hungary and Poland. So what I would like to know is, what is the last deadline for the Commission to have an agreement there to be able to set up the budget for 2021? And what do the treaties or the regulations, the respective ones, say about if a budget would not be in place in time? Which kinds of money would flow, would keep on flowing, and which post would not from 2021? Thank you.
Balázs.
Yes. So when you say budget, then I take it that you refer to the MFF and the MFF regulation, namely. So you know the process for the MFF regulation is basically the special legislative procedure. This means that we need an agreement in the Council, and then the consent of the Parliament is also needed. So this process is ongoing. We are focusing on the Commission side on making sure that this process can go forward as planned. Therefore, I'm not able to give you any particular deadline at this point in time. We are working on it, and we would like to make sure that the decisions that need to be taken are taken, and the MFF regulation is adopted by the 1st of January.
Thank you. Other question on this issue. Tommaso, a question on the budget.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, it's on the budget. So following the veto of yesterday to the own resources decision, does the Commission acknowledge that there will be delays in the disbursement of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, or are you still confident that the funds will be available to the member states by the end of the spring? Thank you.
Look, I think the question is to ensure that we can come to a resolution of this issue and a conclusion of all the steps that are necessary as quickly as possible. We had a long discussion on this yesterday, and we said at the time that our focus is not on trying to calculate at this point in time any new schedule for disbursements. It is to make sure that we find an agreement. And as you know, in July, the member states agreed on 3 things: on the budget, on the multi-financial framework, on Next Generation EU, and on rule of law conditionality. So what we are focusing on at the moment is making sure with the rotating presidency and with the President of the European Council that we can find a solution to this. And 25 member states basically are not contesting the implementation of the agreement of last July. As you said yourself, we have 2 member states which for the moment have taken a position on this. And so what the objective is to try to make sure that we can find an agreement on the basis of what was agreed in July in order to move forward as quickly as possible. David.
Oui, merci Eric. Je reviens sur la première question budget et je voulais savoir qu'est-ce qui se passe avec le budget 2021. Je me rappelle qu'il y a eu un tweet du directeur général de la DG Budget qui parlait d'une date limite, le 13 novembre, je crois, pour trouver un accord MFF pour présenter le projet de budget pour l'année prochaine, 2021. Donc, qu'est-ce qui va se passer avec le budget 2021? Est-ce que les fonds agricoles, les fonds de cohésion, les fonds Horizon, tout ça, pourront être déboursés régulièrement? Deuxième question, c'est une clarification par rapport à ce que nous a dit Balázs hier. Que la décision sur les ressources propres est indispensable aussi pour avoir une MFF en place. Je voulais avoir une précision sur ça parce que j'ai d'autres personnes, des juristes, etc., qui m'ont dit non, c'est pas nécessaire. Il y aura les rebates qui vont tomber, mais en fait, on n'a pas besoin d'une nouvelle décision sur les ressources propres pour avoir MFF en place. Merci.
Oui, donc sur le budget annuel, rappelons-nous que la Commission a fait sa proposition initiale le 24 juin, puis on a eu le Conseil européen en juillet qui a trouvé un accord politique sur le paquet entier. Et puis, on a commencé les trilogues entre le Parlement, le Conseil et la Commission qui ont abouti à un compromis politique le 10 novembre. Donc, sur la base de ce compromis politique, on a ajusté notre proposition initiale pour le budget annuel le 13 novembre à travers une lettre rectificative, amending letter en anglais. Et donc, c'est sur la base de cela qu'aujourd'hui commence le processus de conciliation pour le budget annuel 2021. Donc, quand je dis processus de conciliation, c'est un processus qui implique encore une fois les 3 institutions, le Parlement, le Conseil et la Commission, qui va durer à partir d'aujourd'hui, en fait, jusqu'au 7 décembre. Et donc, voilà, c'est le processus qu'on va suivre pour la finalisation du budget annuel pour l'année prochaine.
En ce qui concerne ta deuxième question sur les ressources propres, la décision ressources propres actuelle reste d'application tant que la nouvelle décision ressources propres n'a pas été ratifiée par tous les États membres et entrée en fonction. Donc, il reste évidemment des moyens pour l'Union européenne pour collecter les ressources nécessaires pour faire des paiements. Mais lorsque nous évoquions ce sujet hier, peut-être que nous sommes mal compris, mais c'était sur base de notre compréhension qu'on parlait de la mise en œuvre non seulement du budget 2021 au sens strict du terme, mais aussi de tout ce qui est lié à Next Generation EU, qui nécessite la nouvelle décision ressources propres afin que nous puissions lever des fonds sur les marchés. D'autres questions budget, mais je vais bientôt arrêter étant donné que nos collègues attendent pour le briefing technique agriculture. Donc je vais prendre deux dernières questions, ou une dernière question. Lorenzo.
Oui, moi je voudrais revenir un moment sur la question de Marc concernant la possibilité d'avoir en 2021 d'avoir l'exercice provisoire en fait, parce que il y a une question technique à laquelle vous pouvez répondre, c'est pas hypothétique, parce que c'est déjà arrivé d'ailleurs. C'est-à-dire quelles sont les dépenses qui peuvent être déboursées en cas d'exercice provisoire et quelles sont les dépenses qui ne peuvent pas être touchées. On sait que on parle de dépenses obligatoires. Je crois qu'il y a là les dépenses concernant la PAC, la politique agricole commune, et les dépenses concernant le fonctionnement des institutions. Et donc c'est une question très simple. Si on arrive là, et il y a des probabilités qu'on y arrive, quelles sont les dépenses qui pourront continuer à être déboursées par l'Union européenne et quelles sont les dépenses qui ne pourront pas aussi.
Merci Lorenzo, mais on a au moins répondu à cette question déjà une demi-douzaine de fois dans cette salle de presse. Et ça fait 1h15 que nous sommes ici, donc je m'excuse, mais ce sont des questions qu'on peut trouver dans n'importe quel manuel sur le budget de l'Union européenne. Tu as tout à fait raison qu'il y a un nombre très limité de dépenses qui peuvent être effectuées si on rentre dans le système des 12e provisoires, qui est par défaut le système qui s'appliquerait si il n'y avait pas de nouveau cadre financier multiannuel ni de budget qui était voté. Je passe encore une fois la parole à Balázs. Excuse un tout petit peu mon impatience, mais nous répondons à cette question à peu près tous les 3 jours ici en salle de presse pour le moment. Vas-y.
Oui, juste pour vous donner un point de référence, donc les mesures de contingence sont décrites dans le traité. En fait, il suffit de regarder l'article 312 et 315.
Merci. Voilà, ceci conclut notre rendez-vous de midi pour aujourd'hui. Nous cédons la place à nos collègues pour le briefing technique sur la politique agricole commune. Et pour ma part, je vous retrouverai demain ici en salle de presse pour le compte-rendu du collège. Merci beaucoup.